We can give it. Give it another minute or two to see who all wants to join us.
And Jen, let me make you a co-host. So you can...
Okay.
There you go. Oh, sorry, I made the wrong. Jenna is who I'm making co-host.
That's all right. Jen is one of my colleagues, and it's not the first time we've been confused.
No, we've been worried about that.
All right, you're good to get started whenever you're ready.
All right. Toan, I think you were going to lead the beginning part of our presentation.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Toan, and I'm here with Dr. Jenna Reno. Welcome to our section. The title of our discussion is analyzing real-world data methods for linking records across disparate data sources. And I think Jenna has the control of the slides. I'm going to ask her to advance. Yeah, transitioning very slowly on my side. Okay.
Oh.
All right. So the goals of our session is to number one, talk about record linkage as an opportunity to expand the data that you used in healthcare research. And then, once you kind of identify the opportunities, to expand your data, then the second thing is to understand the steps that are required to execute data linkage in healthcare. And then the final steps is to identify the barriers and the challenges for you to actually conduct record linkage to make to improve your data. Next slide.
Standard disclosure.
Right. Nothing to disclose. No financial conflict of interest. Okay, so I think the steps that we're gonna follow for this discussion, at first we're gonna introduce the concept of record linkage and the record linkage planning workbook that our team put together. And then, we want to discuss some, specific record linkage use cases. So with that in mind, as audience or participants of this discussion, we would ask you to think of research questions or use cases when we walk you through the workbook, so we can then relate your specific use cases to the workbook and see if we can, match the steps in the workbook to your use cases. So we can have, like a live and interactive discussion when it comes to putting things together to make record linkage happen for your specific use cases. And then at the end, we'll love to hear what you think about the content of the workbook that we are presenting, and looking for opportunity to make the workbook better, so other researchers or investigators can also benefit from using this workbook. Next slide. Okay, so I think I'm gonna go first, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Jenna to talk about the workbook. But you know the objective of these first several slides is to introduce to you why we need to link data together, and so there are the four big promises of linked data. What good from linking data together, and the first one is to fill the gaps, right? Because data, as you know, are scattered into several places, into different sources, and so not a single data source will have everything you need. Will not have everything you need to answer your research question. A very practical example in a project that I'm a part of is to, for example, to find out if your patient got COVID vaccine data, and then so even at our hospital, we administer a lot of COVID vaccine data, but we don't know about the vaccination status of all patients in all Colorado. So if somebody walk into the hospital and we want to know if that person got vaccinated, for COVID-19 or not, we don't know that, right? So to fill the gaps of COVID vaccine data, we have to bring in additional data outside of the institution to fill the gap. The second promise is to make sure that that you don't have duplicates record in your own data set. And so in hospital, for example, it's very common to find that one patient have more than one records in the system, and then I think it was estimated by the Pew Charitable Trust that it costs around $100 for the institution to find and deduplicate records. So it's a real problem. Big data, right? So you always want to bring more into more data from the outside world into your data sets. You can see multiple angles of the data. So the ability to link the data that you have to additional data dimensions that are there will make that happen. And I think on another slide we're going to show a lot of different possibilities in terms of additional data that you can bring in to your data set. And then the final one is to improve data quality, right? So you might have the data, but there's probably some problem or some missingness in your data that you can improve by bringing in additional data set externally. Next slide. Okay, so a very quick definition of record linkage and what it is. So it's actually a process to determine if two or more records belong to the same entity, and then so this entity can be patients, can be provider, can be facilities, or just a subject in your data that you want to make sure you want to consolidate the records that belong to that entity together. So there's some very common terminologies being used in record linkage, and those are clear text record linkage, and that is when you use clear text or human readable data to link the records together. So one thing that I want to say quickly is to link the records. For example, if you want to link records of one patient together, the common thing that people do is to, for example, compare demographics data, compare names, social security number, date of birth, And then when you are doing that comparison using clear text or human readable data, they call that clear text record linkage. However, as you can see, because of the sensitivity of the data, it's not always straightforward to share clear text names or social security number outside of your own institution. So that's why another method that is used to perform linkage is called privacy preserving record linkage, and that is the process to obfuscate the data before you conduct the linkage. So the linkage will be done using obfuscated data, like hash data. When somebody can obtain that hash data from you, they cannot reverse the data back to the clear text value. So in that sense, it's more secure for you to share the names, the social security number to another institution to conduct record linkage. And then the third one is incremental record linkage, and that is when you link the records in smaller portion, right? So usually when people do linkage, they tend to link two big data sets together, or 3 or 4 big data sets together. But incremental record linkage allows you to only link smaller parts of the data, so you don't have to share the entire data set all at once. So with the purpose of improving the security and the privacy of the data. Next slide. Yeah, so those are example of what we mean by clear text data, names in clear text, and what we mean by privacy preserving. So this is, I think it's an actual hash code of the name John Smith. And so, the method we actually use, this hash code to conduct linkage. Next slide. So this diagram basically just show you at a very high level the operation of the 2 major operation of linkage. So for example, if you have multiple records in the same data set, the deduplication effort, is to link the records in that one data set together. So for example, record 1 links to record 3 and 2 to 4 and 5 to 6 and so on. And then and that's deduplication. But when you perform linkage outside of that one data set and reach out to another data set of a different type, right? So for example, data set A here is a medical record data, clinical data, sorry. And then data set B is claims data. So apparently, if you want to bring these 2 data sets together, you try to link the records in between these data sets. Next slide. Okay, so yeah, so on this slide from Weber, 2014, as you can see here, the possibility, the opportunities to enrich data, your data is very extensive. At the top you see we have clinical data, medication data, diagnosis, procedure, and then if you look vertically, you can then expand the clinical data set with other data, socio-economic data, social network environment data, and then for the same category, for example, with diagnosis and procedure, then you can look at into different places, different sources to enrich that, right? And then so death record, and then the ICD codes, and diagnosis from different hospitals, and so basically you can enrich your data. You can improve the breadth of the data, and also the depth of the data, by linking data together. And this diagram does a good job of showing different sources of the data that you can bring together. Next slide. And so just to bring up some record linkage scenarios to relate to the points that we just presented. So for example, a hospital consolidate patient data to ensure that each patient is uniquely identified. And this, that is very important. I think, once, the Pew Charitable Trust, one study also showed that, it's very harmful and very costly in the context of clinical care if, patient data got mismatched or, not complete. And then so, that's very important. The second one is to understand the relationship between insurance deductibles and readmission rate. A healthcare researcher links hospital data with insurance data. All right, so hospital data is clinical data. If you want to bring cost data in, you got to link to insurance data. And then a clinical data network estimate number of diabetic patients among its data sites. Right, when you bring data together from multiple sites in a network, especially when these sites are located next to each other or near close to each other, there's a possibility that a patient got cared at two neighbors into clinics. And then so if you bring their data in, you want to make sure that you are not double counting the patient in your data network. Next slide. And so this diagram show you the basic process of record linkage. The idea is to extract the data from sites. So we have 3 sites here, A, B, C, and then send the data to an honest broker, like an entity that will receive the data, and then that entity will then link the records and then generate the linkage result. And so I think the next step is for Jenna to talk about the details of from the planning perspective to make this happen.
Yes. Do you want to talk about any of these things, Toan?
Sure. Yeah. So very quickly, there's several challenges of to link data. Number one, there's no common identifiers. You probably think that social security number is a good data elements that people can use to link records, but they're not. They have a lot of issues in there that cause a lot of incorrect linkages, and specifically, for example, in pediatric data, social security numbers generally missing, and so you don't have social security number in there. In many other cases, you don't have social security number even in the data set, or you are allowed to have the last 4 digits of social security number. And then when you rely on other data elements to perform linkage, like names or phone numbers and and address, for example, there's other problems in there as well. A lot of typographical errors. And then, name changes, people got married and, got divorced and, and so what we think is stable data, also can change over time. And then, addresses and phone numbers are very, very good linkage variables. However, they do change. They do change over time. We encounter a lot of missing data in linkage. And then, different places have different formats to store their data. Address, for example, as we all know, there's a lot of ways for ones to to put in there to write their address, and date, phone number, and all that. We'll have to deal with the discrepancies when it comes to data format when you try to link records together. So that are the common challenges of record linkage.
Okay. Any questions before we move on to the workbook portion of our time? No? All right, then I'm going to switch real quick to pull up the workbook. While we're doing that, just so Toan and I can get a sense of who our attendees are and what your background is, can you give me a thumbs up reaction if you've ever attempted to do research that combines data from different sources via some form of record linkage? One thumbs up. One potential, two record linkage experts in the audience. All right, so we designed a workbook to help people who are new to conducting research that uses record linkage, or potentially people who have done record linkage in the past to think through and streamline their process for designing studies that use record linkage. So we really tried to think through the user experience of what does this process look like and what types of questions do people need to be considering when they're starting out designing a study that is going to need to use data from different sources. So I've included our workbook, a link to it in the chat, so you can pull that up for yourself, but I will just give you a quick preview of this workbook, and then I'm hoping that we have time to do a use case example. So as you might imagine, when you're designing any type of study, it's not necessarily a straightforward process. You don't, write a grant proposal by, going straight through and starting specific aims, innovation, or I'm losing words now, Toan. You don't go straight through your process and just like write the whole thing start to finish. It's an iterative process. And so that's what we tried to exemplify in our workbook, is that, there are different steps and stages in the way that we have laid out the workbook, but that it's not necessarily a process that you can just go through in like one foul swoop. So starting off, you need to establish an opportunity and need for record linkage. So as Toan just gave you several examples, you might start with a research question and identify that you're going to need data that comes from different sources, that you can't just have a singular data source in order to answer your research question or hypothesis. And so after you've established that you need to do record linkage, you need to start thinking about is this feasible to conduct this record linkage? Do you have access to the data you need, or can you get access to the data that you need in order to answer your questions? And then once you have started thinking about your data, you go through this, what we call the select and describe linkage approach. So we will show you in a moment how we've attempted to guide users through this process of starting to think about different questions that are important for determining how you're going to link your data together. And then finally, this last section is about establishing data sharing agreements and approvals. And then as part of this workbook, Toan has led a larger project that has developed what we call COPRH, that's a CU record linkage. It is a platform that allows you to actually perform the processes of linking the data. Did I say that correctly, Toan? Toan understands the technical parts of this much better than I do.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So as I said, the first section walks you through kind of thinking through questions of, what is your research question? Some of these are things that most of you are probably very familiar with. What data are needed to answer your question? So starting to think about what specific variables you're going to need. And then thinking about where is that data available? Where can you get access to that data? And if it is in multiple locations, that's probably a pretty good clue that you're going to need to perform record linkage. And again, so just thinking about what specific data sets are or variables are in each of these sources, and how might you be able to link common identifiers across those two sources. And then what are your purposes? So Toan already went through these in his introduction, but making sure you're really clear about understanding what your purpose for linking the data is going to be. And then starting to think about the limitations of your research, and if you can't get access to the data that you need, or would you be able to answer your question if you only had a single data source, or do you definitely need a second data source? And if so, that's a pretty good chance that yes, record linkage is the method that you're going to need to use for your project. Oh, this is not the right version of the workbook. Okay, hold on. Let me find this for you. I'm sorry, I've been having technical difficulties today. Earlier, my Zoom camera just went out. Thanks, Natalie, for the time check-in. So yes, I've been trying to handle technical issues all day. So technology is trying to thwart me. All right, here we go. All right, so we put together these decision trees to walk you through this process of determining feasibility. So starting out with, are all of the data sets available to you? And then thinking about some of the different technical challenges and permissions that are needed to walk you through this process. So you can see that it asks you several questions. And then at the end, if you are able to answer yes to all of these questions, you could determine that the data that you have available to you can be used for record linkage. And then going on to the next page, again, in thinking about feasibility, there are several questions to help you think through this process of the type of data and the variables that are present in those data sets, and whether or not those variables are feasible for linking. So Toan already identified some of these common personal identifiers that can be used for determining if entities can be matched. And so this guides you through, again, this process of thinking through questions that you need to be able to answer when conducting record linkage. All right, and then in the third section, you start to think about the methods that you might use. So a lot of these questions get into kind of more technical detail about methods. So if you're not someone who typically performs this type of work, you might need to bring these to your favorite statistician or analyst and ask them to help you think through some of these questions about using de-identified data or working with various data variable qualities, how this might work in terms of the frequency with which you need to update data. And so you can see that these are multiple decisions that help you determine the types of methods that are appropriate for your research study. And then in the fourth section, it's all about establishing those resources, thinking about the timeline and approvals so that you can be successful in executing your project and meeting any milestones that you might agree to and deliverables for your project. So we have 5 minutes left. Do you have time for a use case, Toan?
No, so I think our original plan goes out the windows, but what we can do is we can make this workbook available to to all who are interested, and then we can we'll be available via email, or if you think this, so there are two things that we ask, if you're interested in trying to use this this workbook for your specific record linkage use cases. You can think about the project that you were a part of, or you are working on, or you plan to do, because the objective of this workbook is to guide the user through the process of thinking how to to bring everything together, starting from the data to the method, to the IRB, all of the things that you need to do to protect the data in that process. So if you can use this workbook and think about the steps proposed in this workbook in the context of your own research, and then we then can have a deeper discussion when it comes to the application of these steps in your research. We'll be available to help you with that. And the second thing is to ask for your feedback when it comes to the the usefulness of materials like this workbook, in terms of clarity or organization or content, that you can that will help you to apply the things that are proposed here in your research. Jenna, do you have anything to add to that? Anything else?
No, I just wanted to, so I think I opened the workbook through that link, that Mountain Scholar link that I provided. And now I'm curious if other people are having that same issue with it, with parts of the workbook being blank, which I don't know why that would happen, but it sounds like in the chat that some people have been able to successfully download the correct version of the workbook. Yes.
No, it is blank. I just checked
Okay. That is very frustrating. I don't know why that is. And unfortunately, we don't have the ability to update that link, because Mountain Scholar is going through a transition right now where we can't make any changes for potentially months. But let's see if we can find another way to get those who are interested the correct version. We are definitely still in the process of updating the workbook, so this is not our final version, but it is a semi-final version, a draft to say. So why don't I grab the link real quick from our Google Drive, and I'll put that in the chat. So it'll just take me a moment to find it.
So Natalie, is it possible for us to share a link to the participants in this section?
And you can use the chat now, or you can share it. I believe there's a place that you can share things after the sessions. Let me double check.
Okay.
Yeah, we might have to update something on the website, the COPRHCon website? Oh yes, I'm looking for a link that I have.
Can you, is there, I think there's forums that you can post to after.
Okay.